Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After you through the news you need to know about, we run you through the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. I was really hoping the Jalen Ramsey trade would have happened already, as it was, I feel like we were getting multiple reports that it was going to happen June 1st. I was like, oh, maybe it'll happen Monday. Didn't happen. So it's going to suck if, I make this and then Jalen Ramsey's traded like a few hours later, but hasn't been traded yet. Still want him to be traded. I was really excited about it. Still hasn't happened. Don't really know. There's really no tangible update on it. It's pretty much the same thing. I did see one article where it was put perfectly that if the Dolphins do trade him, his salary basically gets cut up into two, like half this year, half the next year, as opposed to cutting him and eating all that dead cap now. Which, honestly, is there an argument to be made that would be a better... I guess they definitely don't save less money. But, I don't know, I don't know. I guess worst case scenario, he's cut. But who knows what's going to happen. Which we've seen in a lot of NFL teams. This happens a lot. When you show your hand this much, usually NFL teams do end up just cutting that player. But yeah, it's been reported multiple times. It seems, and we've talked about this so many times, but it seems like him and Mike McDaniel don't get along anymore for whatever reason. They never got along. If you guys remember the Hard Knocks, which it's like 2 years ago when we had Hard Knocks, and there was that weird clip between the two of them. Even when Jalen Ramsey first got here, he called Mike McDaniel weird. So it just never was a good marriage. And that's what makes it even worse that Chris Grier extended him. There had to have been something within the organization or somebody was like, yeah, this isn't working. So it just isn't a good fit for both sides. It never was. It never felt like it was. And again, just every time I think about extending him, it just makes me even more upset. They didn't even give up a lot for him in the trade. It's like nothing. They had no. It wasn't like they gave up a second round pick. They had no, like, oh, we have to see this through. We have to give him this extension because of what we've invested in it. They didn't invest anything in it. It just doesn't make any sense. And again, it's been brought up so many times, but they could have used that money to extend younger players that have been within the organization, that were drafted here, that are better on and off the field, and are way younger, like Christian Wilkins and Javon Holland, but they didn't do that. And the more you think about this, it's one of the worst decisions in the history of the franchise. And what's even weirder about it are those players are great picks by Chris Grier. He drafted them. You would think, I don't understand this. He might be just an irrational person. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sick about it. I'm sick of reading it. I just can't wait till it's over. Anyway, this next news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins outside linebackers Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips nearing full strength, which is great news. Mike McDaniel said via Armando Salguero, who's a longtime beat writer for the Dolphins, considering we're both most things most days. Hold on, I skipped way too far ahead. Quote, most things most days, referring to what they've been able to do in OTAs, which is really good news. So it seems like they're both going to be ready for the start of the season, which is great. At least that's what this article goes on to pretty much say. We'll see how much training camp stuff they can do right away. I would imagine Bradley Chubb is going to be able to go, but I don't know about Jalen Phillips. But it seems like they're both on track for week 1, which is good. Kind of really good underrated news. And I actually really like Bradley Chubb. I think seems like a really cool dude. I like that he has this allegiance to the Dolphins as a team, that he wants to accomplish something here. which is very rare that you get a player like that, especially in a trade. And and even like players like Jonnu Smith, I like that a lot of players like being Dolphins, and especially with this particular culture and everything that they've set up. Now, we've had cracks in it, but I think all teams go through that. Nobody's impervious to stuff like that. Even the Patriots with Bill Belichick dealt with a lot of that stuff throughout the years. But it's nice to hear. And it's not also like it's never brought up. Like, we have 2 disgruntled players, but then there's like 2 players that really love being Dolphins and nobody cares. And Tyreek Hill, it seems like he's kind of fully back and wants to contribute in a good way. But anyway, I just really like Bradley Chubb as an off-the-field kind of a guy. And I completely lost my train of thought. But it's good that they kept Jalen and Bradley on the team. And I'm really excited to see what... with those guys on the defensive line, what they can do in this defense, because I think, and I've said it many times, but I there's a lot of potential there, so I'm very excited about that. Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, and Chop Robinson coming off the bench in rotation, with Anthony Weaver, who's a phenomenal defensive coordinator, with better linebackers and more depth at that position, I think is going to be, and they have Kenneth Grant now. Like, I really, really like the potential. I think this defense has a lot more potential than people think. This was the worst news. I don't know. Is there anything else we can talk about before we get to the worst news? Yeah, so we'll talk about this. Tyreek Hill. Mike McDaniel said via Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald that the veteran receiver, quote, has done a great job being proactive once he got the surgery done and making sure he can do as much as he can with the team. Per NFL Network's Cameron Wolfe, he tore a ligament in his left wrist during training camp, but still started all 17 games in the regular season. He at least played 70% of the Dolphins' offensive snaps in each game last season. And Mike McDaniel also said that he doesn't anticipate... Hill isn't expected to be catching passes until training camp. And according to every beat writer, Tyreek Hill has been very proactive, like this article states. And not just from Mike McDaniel saying that, but everybody who's been able to view OTAs to the public and everything has also stated that, which I think is a good thing. And then obviously, now granted, people can say anything in a video, but there was that video that Tyreek Hill was in that he was talking about how he wasn't as locked in last year. And dedicated to having a great season. He had a lot of off-the-field issues and wasn't, I guess, training like he normally does. So he's claiming all of that has changed. And in his defense, I know a lot of people, I mean, he's a crazy person. Really crazy off-the-field life that has been made very public over the years, but by all accounts, the man's a very, very hard worker. So at least there's that. 31 years old. This might be his last great season as an NFL player. If it is true that if he does think that's what kind of hindered him last year, was his conditioning sucked and all that. We'll see. And hopefully we can get another great Tyreek Hill season. Because, again, to be like, depending on what happens for the rest of the offseason, this team is really, really well balanced on offense for the first time since Tyreek Hill got here. I really like the offensive line. I think it's the best that they've had, and they're going to have, the best running game because of that. So, and Mike McDaniel hasn't had that since he got here, and that's the whole reason he got hired. I mean, he was the run game coordinator for Kyle Shanahan, for God's sake. So, I'm excited about that. So let's get on to just the dumbest news of the offseason, in my opinion. And there's a lot to break down here. Jonnu Smith has been in trade talk, or the Miami Dolphins have been in trade talks with the Pittsburgh Steelers about trading Jonnu Smith. Jonnu wants to remain in Miami. Drew Rosenhaus via the Barry Jackson, the Miami Herald, said this, who is Jonnu's agent. He said, quote, Jonnu would definitely like to stay in Miami. That's his first choice. This is where he lives in the offseason. His dream team is the Dolphins. Hopefully everything works out where he can stay in Miami. He goes on to say how he had his best season statistically in his career in this offense. The best season that a Dolphins tight end has ever had was what Jonnu Smith did last year. And honestly, a lot of the time, he not only did he have a great connection with Tua, but when Tua was hurt, he was pretty much the number one option in the passing game. Like, I don't even think that's debatable. Because of the inconsistencies between injuries and just on the field, and Waddle and Hill were absent without Tua. Jonnu was the only consistent offensive player that entire season. It didn't matter who was the quarterback. He still had a really good season. And Mike McDaniel has a really good track record with tight ends and getting the most out of them. Obviously, George Kittle in San Francisco. Gary Barnidge, I don't know if you guys remember who that is, but he had a 1,000-yard season with Cleveland one year, and he contributes that to Mike McDaniel and his scheme. Some of the stuff that they would put in during the week, even though he wasn't the offensive coordinator, he contributed a lot to his success that season as the tight end. So he knows how to use tight ends really well, with whether it's in just the screen game or just the passing game in general. And I saw Omar Kelly saying, "Oh, he's a one-dimensional tight end," basically saying it's not as big of a deal to get rid of him. I totally disagree with that. He is not. He is a 3-down tight end. He's a way better run blocker than Durham Smythe ever was, in my opinion. And Durham Smythe, they used a lot throughout the years. Now, I'm not saying that's, to clear the bar over Durham Smythe isn't saying a ton, but and they're not going to have that problem because they draft or they signed tight ends in the offseason that can do that. But he's very unique. He's a competent run blocker. He's great after the catch. He has really good hands. He's a very good receiving tight end just in general. He's not the most phenomenal route runner in the world, but he adds another element that stresses defenses out. And he's a weapon for this offense. So if the Dolphins trade him, not only do they become worse, but I've talked about this so much, but he is, and this is something that we've been searching for, is a reliable third option in the passing game when everybody's healthy. We haven't had that. That's something that we've been really trying to search for, and maybe Malik Washington can become that, or even Westbrook and Kine, who is very talented. But none of those, maybe Malik Washington maybe that's what they're trying to do with him, is use him more of it as a slot player. But Westbrook and Kine isn't really that. So, I don't know. They would just be losing a lot of... they would be losing a lot if they traded Jonnu Smith. He had a career franchise year for the Dolphins with Tyler Huntley and Skylar Thompson coming in and out of the lineup. That matters. And like I said, him and Tua have a great connection. Just watch the Jets game. There were so many games he dominated in. So I don't really understand why this is even becoming a thing. Now, if you do research online, there's so many articles about this, but even Ian Rappaport said that it was more of a gauging interest type thing. Obviously, Jonnu Smith wants a new contract, and I guess the best thing that I read about this whole situation, I can't remember who. It might have been the Sun Sentinel wrote this article, but they were saying basically the Dolphins are waiting to trade Jalen Ramsey. And I will throw this in here too because I forgot to bring it up, but Teron Armstead is officially retired, so they're getting a little bit of money from that too to extend Jonnu Smith. So I don't know if that's true, but that's what I read. Basically, it was basically a theory. They're not reporting this as fact. It makes sense, that theory. I hope it's true. I am totally against this trade. I really am. Because this offense is so talented, and I do think it's the most balanced offense that they've had. And just like if they trade him, then they just have a giant hole at tight end again, and there's no replacing that. So what are you gonna do? You're like Julian Hill, who by the way is very talented. I really like Julian Hill, but he hasn't put it together yet. He's been a liability, whether it's fumbles or penalties. He's been awful. So he's very talented physically, but he just hasn't been able to put it together on the field yet. So that's who they're going to rely on, is that. Who was it? Like, just like, do they base any decision off film at all? They're like, okay, if we trade him, that this is our tight end room. It's like, no, then, I mean, it's not their fault that Jonnu Smith out of, like, I don't know if this is out of nowhere. Did they know this? Like, I don't know. It's just a bad situation. I really hope this doesn't happen, and that we get to see all of these players play together on the same offense. I think is like your big four is really good. Jonnu Smith, Devon Achane, Jalen Waddle, and Tyreek Hill. Those are really good weapons for your quarterback. So couple that with, in my opinion, a much improved offensive line, I think is I'm excited to see that. So I just hope that doesn't get ruined, and they don't make this trade, which would be really stupid. So I don't know. I'm really hoping we don't have to talk about that in a couple of days, where it's like, the Dolphins traded Jonnu Smith. That would really suck, and I hope that doesn't happen. So one thing I want to say before I in this video is that I'm really annoyed by the report, other than like Barry Jackson and even Armando Salguero, who that was really good reporting, really getting more insight on the Jonnu Smith situation. That's the stuff I love. That's their job. And I know I've talked about this so many times, but I feel like our beat writers, for the most part, are terrible. Some of these Dolphins, like, not the fan podcasts, but like the people, like I'm talking like Chris Perkins and Omar Kelly, like people like that who actually report on the Dolphins, their podcasts are like, it's just like insufferable sometimes. It's just, I would like to have what is going on with this franchise. Instead, it's just pure speculation. It's like, I understand that from if it's a fans podcast, that makes a lot of sense. Like, they're not in the building. That's not their job, is to report. Their job is to report on the team, for God's sake. It just doesn't make any sense. Why are there 7 beat writers if only one of them does their job consistently? It just makes me so upset. When I click on an Omar Kelly video, or a Chris Perkins video, or a Barry Jackson video, or who's the other one? Dave Hyde. I click on that video. I want special insight. Even like if anybody watches the Dan Patrick Show, when he has people on that are beat writers, that's why he has them on. He's like, okay, what are you hearing within the organization? And that, I swear to God, we don't get that. It's so weird. I don't know. We really have to do better in that department. So yeah. Also, the Dolphins YouTube channel is terrible. Travis Winfield's fine. I think he's great. To have that, to have that kind of a person on the official channel and do like breakdowns and stuff, I think he does a great job. But like, there's like no reason to subscribe to that channel other than, I would say, during the season, because they've done a much better job at posting like top 5 these, top 10 plays, top 5 plays of this or that, which they never did before, and finally they're doing that. But we need to step it up. All right. Also, I know they'll never do this, but I wish we could see. Back in the day, they still do scrimmages, but I think ours were canceled last year. But it would be nice, like how college football does it. But like, the coach is on the field, they're mic'd up, it's summer, it's OTAs. Let's, like a 30-minute video of just throwing and catching and stuff like that. I really wish the NFL would do stuff like that, but they don't. Anyway, yeah. Krisker is on my everlasting nerve. This is just a very odd decision for the organization to make if they get rid of one of their best offensive players, and it's a position that it doesn't have a lot of depth at. When you talk about playmaking, he's the only playmaker in the tight end room, and you don't have a replacement for that. Then you would be below average at that position. You go from a Pro Bowl, you have a Pro Bowl caliber player in that room, to below average. So, I don't know. Maybe Chris should think about that. And maybe use your money better, dude, in free agency, for God's sakes. We wouldn't even be having this conversation if we weren't financially tied to players that didn't help anyway. That did. It doesn't even make it. Dude, the fact that he could have extended players that he drafted, Javon Holland and Christian Wilkins, which were both hits, and he used the money on Jalen Ramsey, it doesn't, like, what is going on? I mean, even at the time, this isn't like, hindsight's 2020. Everybody didn't like that decision when they made it. So it just feels like common sense, and I don't know. Chris Greer, I would love to interview him in some like an alternate dimension, because I would have like an entire just notes on notes about like, why did you make, like, what oh my God, you can make an hour-long special on all the regimes he's been through and why certain decisions were made and stuff like that. But anyway, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully Johnny Smith doesn't get traded, for God's sakes.